Everyone, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are talking with Donna Pucci, and what we're talking about is our relationship with food, which of course we will be addressing some of the eating disorders as well. Let me tell you a little bit about Donna Pucci. Donna Pucci is back at the starting point for the second time, but the second time has been what, 4 or 5 years now, isn't it,
Yeah,
Donna?
3 years, yeah.
She believes that one's past informs but does not define who a person truly is. She has 25 years in the field of addictions and mental health. She is a multifaceted practitioner who meets the client in the present moment, creating a working partnership to address each individual's specific needs and concerns. Using a client-centered approach, Donna offers her unique set of skills and perspective to all those navigating the journey of healing, recovery, and life. Besides that, Donna is a wonderful person, and you're going to really enjoy getting to know her through this conversation that we are going to have. So when I invited you to join us for this, Donna, you were very clear that we shouldn't just talk about eating disorders as we traditionally have. We should be talking about relationships with food.
Yes, definitely.
So I'm going to let you kick off and explain the difference to us.
Okay. Well, we all have a relationship with food in a variety of ways, and it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of an eating disorder, although the terms of eating disorder has become very common for any type of relationship with food that someone feels as if is not not as normal as other people might expect. So we want to differentiate, or I like to differentiate between disordered eating and eating disorders. Okay. And there's more literature and there's more coming out in terms of taking a look at disordered eating, and that is one's relationship with food that might, again, fall out of the realm, and dieting is included in that, so that the experience of restricting food, and then picking it up again, and on and on, but you're able to continue to function. You're on a diet, go to Weight Watchers, whatever. First of the year is always big on dieting. So we want to look at that as more disordered eating. A lot of people do it. Many have probably engaged in it in their lifetime, but it rises to the level of an eating disorder when it actually is either there's some medical concerns about it, or that it really has become so preoccupied with food and with weight that it is interfering with one's functioning in life. So I think that it's important that we look at our relationship with food in the lens of our families, of our cultural realities. That we have to eat to live, and food is part of it, and it's part of many traditions, it's part of many ceremonies, and we want to really take a look at that relationship, and has it gone as far as being an eating disorder, or are there some ways that we can have conversations about a relationship with food that doesn't really rise to the occasion of an eating disorder, but perhaps a preoccupation with diet or weight, or some other issues.
Donna, I always, when we start talking about these topics, I'm assuming that genetics and environment play a role. Also, you often hear family members often teasing, or some of us may call shaming, someone about their weight.
Right.
What play does all of this have on an individual's relationship with food?
Sure. Well, sort of historically, we've looked at, the whole idea that in media messages about what is, what's the right body size, and these types of messages that have fostered eating disorders, and we know that that's true, right? I mean, we know that there's an influence on media and culture, on the whole thin identity. Of course, much of that is beginning to change. There's a shift in terms of body acceptance. There are many, advocates out there that are talking about body acceptance. And we have, women of size in particular, because it's not just women, it is men too, but women of size who are promoting body acceptance and fat acceptance. And it's becoming more of a cultural norm to be able to talk about and accepting of one's body. Some of the more recent research is looking at the genetics of eating disorders. And I'm saying that, is there a gene? Is someone really predisposed to developing an eating disorder? And right now, the literature, the research is in its early stages, but there's some interesting findings regarding some identifying some genes and phenotypes that tend to have an association with those who develop an eating disorder. And this is out of some of the twin studies out of Minnesota in particular. We understand some eating disorders running in families. And again, the literature and research looks at sort of what comes first, in a family system in which someone is preoccupied with food, where there is a rigidity around food. Does someone have an eating disorder because they've been told to restrict all these times? Or is it because there's a genetic predisposition already in the mother or father, one of the parents, in terms of their own genetics, that they were, predisposed to developing these restrictive eating patterns. So the literature is actually very interesting because some of it is related to mental health, how we understand mental health around anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder, in particular when we talk about eating disorders in terms of bulimia or anorexia. It's really taking a look at sort of which comes first. And I'm sure that any of you that understand eating disorders or are aware of it at all understand that there is a lot of anxiety, there is a lot of OCD related to some of these more extreme forms of eating disorder that runs in the family. Right? The other is, again, it clashes with our cultural norms, and what it is that we're born into a certain type of body that we've inherited. It's genetic, predisposed to whatever fat deposits being in a certain area, and it can conflict with what one believes one should look like. How should I be? I should look like this, except genetically, that's not who I am. Genetically, whatever, I'm big boned or predisposed to a certain way of being. Certain whatever have heavier legs or arms, and it doesn't fit that norm. And when someone tries to do that and is trying to manipulate their body to be something that it's not, we can move from disordered sort of healthy eating into an eating disorder because we're trying to create a body that does not want to be that way. So there's lots of conflict when we talk about disordered eating and eating disorder.
The numbers always really amaze me with eating disorders. It says 28.8 Americans will have a history of, will have an eating disorder in their lifetime. That's a lot of people, and it just seems like it's been it's sort of been categorized as something that happens to teenagers, but teenagers grow up. Do you want to address that a little bit, Donna?
Yes. So, again, that ties into a lot of the media exposure, and certainly, nowadays with social media and the ways in which we can manipulate pictures, right? And put up images of what you really want to look like rather than how one really looks. And it's so misleading to others. You have the influencers who are, putting images up that, everything is fine and dandy, but not really representing their true self. So when we work with teenagers, we do have to work. And then I know Vince just did a whole thing on, I haven't seen all of it, on social media and the influence of social media. And certainly its pros and cons with that. But the downside of it is the expression how these pictures can be manipulated and made to seem that this is a great life and this body size is the right one, and whatever. Pictures along the Riviera, and this is what, every life should be, and it's not. It's misleading.
And eating disorders have a very high death rate, don't they?
They can, certainly anorexia nervosa, which is considered in some circles as being the most severe form, and that is restricting because of the way in which the body begins to break down because of being malnutrition. And bulimia nervosa, which is generally viewed as seeing of purging either through exercise or by vomiting or use of laxatives, can also have other comorbidities with it in terms of resulting gastrointestinal disease, rupture of the esophagus, tooth issues, decay, which can lead to other infections throughout the body. So it is really dangerous. When I work with anyone, we start with a medical exam and just make sure that everything is in order. The interesting thing is there are those who have suffered from this for a long time, from anorexia, and the body just adapts, right? And so can really be in this state of malnutrition for an extended period of time, not without consequences, but for extended period of time. And that part is alarming, because once the body really gets into this starvation and deprivation, it stays there, right? Our bodies have this own tendency to preserve themselves, and they don't want to be gone, and so they adapt, and it can go on for a long time.
Wasn't it once known as a woman's disease? Aren't we seeing more and more men with this issue as well?
Yes, it was primarily seen as a woman's disease because men have historically been been allowed to eat whatever they want to eat, and put on weight, or bulk up for this or that. It was acceptable, and is still acceptable in many sporting events, particularly in wrestling, for men to binge and purge in order to make weight, or to restrict. And that's not just in wrestling, but in a lot of the sport events as well. It also has a lot to do with men, and we're beginning to, again, have more research and more support of that, and you've probably heard on toxic masculinity, of boys, of men, trying to fit an image themselves in terms of being, bulked up and strong. And it's acceptable. It's okay if a guy goes to the gym and works out for 3 hours and only drinks protein drinks, because he's bulking up and having this fit, abs and all this. But it's not acceptable if a woman's at the gym for 3 hours. So this is what we deal with, and it's beginning to work with young boys in terms of accepting them for who they are, and they don't have to be just an athlete or bulk up or be this tone, that there's other aspects to being a man that's not as toxic as some that have been exposed to. So we're seeing more men. It also affects the LGBTQ community, particularly with gay men, and body image and just their awareness of their own bodies. We see a lot more of that, and as the LGBTQ community becomes more accepted and out and open, we're seeing more the emergence of more acceptance and awareness that this is affecting the community.
Donna, can you just explain, sort of define some of the eating disorders? Because I think they're surprising sometimes. Most of us know about anorexia and bulimia, but there are other diseases that we should talk about.
Yeah, so the anorexia and is really defined in terms of body weight and the restricting of foods, eating very minimal, limited diet. And we know that is, someone who is really looking thin. There is a categories within that, sort of eating disorders, undefined type of thing that someone can be identified as anorexia without looking as emaciated as we think of that. And so we have to be careful that, if someone says, this is my eating pattern and this is how much I eat in a day, but their body weight is not reflective of that, they can still be categorized as suffering from anorexia. Bulimia is binge eating large quantities of food over a short period of time, and then getting rid of it, either through purging or the use of exercise or laxatives. And it's a pattern that is repeated on a regular basis. And doesn't have to be every day, doesn't have to be every meal, but it does have to be consistent over a period of time. Generally, in any DSM are you doing this for like 3 months is the standard. Binge eating disorder has come to be recognized in the DSM as well. And that's, eating large quantities of food over a short period of time and retaining it. And, again, be able to treat that in terms of some of it is there's, some other subcategories in that with nighttime eating, which tends to be with more toward binge eaters do this. Sometimes those with others with bulimia or anorexia because of the secretiveness around eating, so they're eating at night. There's another subcategory that isn't categorized yet with the DSM 4 or 5, and that's the orthorexia. I was talking with Loretta about this earlier, and that is those that are involved with restrictive eating by getting involved in clean eating, and there's a cultural acceptance of pushing towards, certainly no GMOs. There's no, everything has to be organic. Everything has to be in as whole form as possible. And all that is fine until it becomes so restrictive that an individual is not able to function in life. They can't go out, they can't eat anyplace else unless they know exactly how a food is prepared, that it doesn't have any additives. And certainly, if somebody has an allergy, can understand that, or, some way in which their foods have to be restricted. But there is a tendency to have this be more acceptable culturally because it's promoting healthy eating and this whole wellness aspect, and you can, chart it and use a Fitbit and have all that.
How can you help somebody that you're concerned about, say that lives in your house, a child, a spouse, a partner, or a distant relative that you see dropping weight?
Yeah. Quite honestly, it's tough. It's going to be tough because, an individual may not know, they may just really be at this disordered eating. I think that it is okay to be as transparent about concern without monitoring one's food. Those who I know, especially young women with a eating disorder or disordered eating, they don't want their food to be monitored. They don't want you looking over the shoulder and counting their calories. They're already preoccupied with it. But of encouraging support, and there are a wide range of support groups that are available for young people, including NEDA, the National Eating Disorders Association. There are support groups, and people can get a lot out of that, of talking with each other about what it means to have disordered eating, some of their thinking patterns around the food. What is really important is just to express your concern and and have them talk about what's going on for them with that, and to get a therapist that deals with eating disorders if possible.
Do eating disorders fall under addiction?
They can. There has been, there's the movement with Overeaters Anonymous, of course, that looks at particularly binge eating disorder as an addiction, particularly to an addiction to sugar and white flour. That it is seen as, similar to alcohol, because we know that alcohol, breaks down into simple sugars. And so, yes, it can be seen as an addiction. And the addiction model has been very effective in working with many people. Many people have recovered or are in recovery with an eating disorder using the 12-step model, for sure. And there are other models that are also available if a 12-step model doesn't really feel comfortable for someone. And so I encourage people to find what fits. If going to OA works and the community of support that exists there, and in some cases it involves weighing and measuring food, then go for it. Whatever is going to work to stop the preoccupation and obsession around food, so that one can get on and have a life.
Donna, sometimes you're sitting there watching TV and you're seeing Noom come on, you're seeing Weight Watchers advertise, and I think, about Overeaters Anonymous, and we are a society or a culture that worries about weight.
Yes.
Is the danger zone for everyone different?
Yes. We found, sort of the standard in terms of like being overweight has been the use of the BMI, right? The body mass index. And the body mass index was actually calculated by a mathematician. He wasn't a physician. It was a mathematician who came up with this formula to just sort of assess how many individuals based on height and weight, fit into a certain category. But what we've come to find out is that the BMI is not the only indicator of health, and yet we still use it. We still use. I also work at Penn Medicine. We still use it, as a way of determining who is overweight or who is considered clinically obese, or who is underweight, right? By determining the BMI. But it's not the only indicator. So I always encourage people to work with a physician in terms of having blood pressure and A1C, your sugar levels and your lipids and all of those things checked out as well, so that there's other measures of a healthy body. I think I got distracted from the question, but
no, that's exactly what I asked. The BMI, I'm glad to hear that. That makes me feel much better.
I mean,
the mathematician, shame on him.
Yeah. Well, it's more of the medical profession adopting it, because again, many of these things we adopted in the medical profession is used. It's used by insurance companies. If you have a BMI of such and such, and you want to get a knee replacement, they may deny it until your BMI is done, because they say, well, it's not going to work anyway, right? So there's these determinations that are made, and we know that that muscle mass is heavier, so someone's BMI might be higher, but they can still be healthy. But these types of measurements are used in insurance companies to make determinations that may or may not be in a patient's best interest.
And the other commercial that is constantly on is the new injections for weight loss.
Yes.
Thoughts, concerns about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that the everybody, Ozempic is really designed for those with type 2 diabetes, although it has been prescribed off label for weight loss. Wegovy is the one that was really designed for weight loss. for those who are really have additional comorbidities, where weight loss really is going to impact their blood pressure, that they're at risk, or their A1C and diabetes or prediabetes. And losing weight, we know, will have a positive impact on those other measures of health. It has, as others things in the past, it may be overprescribed at this point. Certainly there's a shortage of it. It's not designed for someone to lose 10 pounds before, a family member's wedding or something, but it has been prescribed that way. It uses, the mechanism is a hormone that blocks the way we process appetite. Appetite is processed in the brain, and so don't feel hungry, and so eat less is basically the principle behind it. In some ways, I think it's another miraculous discovery. And the other hand, I'm waiting to see what the long-term effects are going to be. Right now, we know that some of the side effects can be some gastrointestinal disorders. That it does impact that. So if anybody is looking to contact their primary care physician about it, with caution, as well as it seems, at least at this point, that once started, it may be a lifetime medication.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
The data is inconclusive right now. It's just beginning, because there were studies, of course, done, because everything has to have a study before it can be FDA approved, but there haven't been longitudinal studies, 10 years. What happens 15 years from now? We don't know. But there will be more coming out on the market, I'm sure. With the success of this, there'll be more pharmaceuticals companies jumping on the
That's for sure. You talked about obsessive, eating or non-eating. So is that what sometimes makes eating disorders fall into the mental health category or the addiction category? Is it the obsession one way or the other that makes it different?
Yes, it's been classified in the DSM, as a mental health issue. I think that some of the new research, we will find that there are genetic and biological reasons for this as well, and that the approaches then to interfering, to doing any type of intervention, will include both of these. But yes, it is a preoccupation with food. The idea of food: what am I going to eat? What am I not going to eat? How much do I weigh today? How much have I exercised? All this, a preoccupation that it takes up all kinds of brain space, is what really categorize it from disordered eating into an eating disorder. That the preoccupation, the obsessiveness around food and calories and weight and those numbers take up more brain space than living the rest of one's life.
So then tell me, what does a healthy relationship with food look like? No ice cream?
It really, it's really sort of eating as healthy as possible. I think that, that we have to eat. We have to eat, and that your relationship with food, we say, is a healthy one. Is that if, and this happened. My family growing up. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. When we got through with breakfast, she was already talking about what she was going to make for dinner. Now, is that a preoccupation, or is that just I have to pull out whatever meat to make for dinner? So your relationship with food is that you can think about it. We have to think about it, that it's as balanced as possible in terms of protein, starch, vegetables, that you're eating, those variety of choices, and that it's not interfering with, it doesn't get in the way of you living your life, that you're not stopping to go to an event, a social event, a wedding, because you're not sure what they're going to provide. You know, that you have this, even if you're restricted, you know, I have friends who are, you know, gluten-free, and it's like, okay, well, you know, I can have gluten-free pasta. We have a lot of gluten-free choices these days. You know, there's options that are made available, so we can, you know, adhere to people's preferences. But you know, that's a healthy relation. You can have certain preferences, and if you have, you know, whatever, you don't eat, you know, whatever, you don't eat red meat, that's okay. You can still have other choices, you know, making these choices. It doesn't mean that it's unhealthy.
I guess what often concerns me is the assumption when you see someone heavy or when you see someone thin that there's something wrong.
Right.
I'm imagining that when it's a family member or a loved one, we have to tread very carefully.
Yes.
But if it's accompanied with anxiety, depression, how do we get help without causing more of an issue?
Right. I mean, the approach is really one, you know, there's an inventory, right? They have them online all the time about, certainly about alcohol. And it's like, have you ever thought you've had a bad relationship with alcohol? You know, if you say yes, well, if you identify it, you know, then, you know, the individual, so you approach an individual and say, you know, has this, you know, does it concern you? You know, are you concerned about your weight? Are you concerned about your health at this point? And of then beginning with seeing the primary care provider, so that everything can be worked out initially. Because unfortunately, the reality is that to get someone that you're very concerned about into treatment really depends on your insurance. And so I was going to come here with like a list of all these facilities and all these eating disorders, and I realized it doesn't matter. You can look up an eating disorder and say, that's perfect for me or my family member, but insurance doesn't cover it. So anyone that is interested, as I always say, start now with your insurance company, see who they have a relationship, and then we'll work backwards. Recognizing that your insurance company can work with a facility and do a one-time deal with them, an on par exchange if it is out of network. So there's ways of having it paid for through the insurance, even if they're out of network. To be aware of that.
Donna, I can't tell you how much we appreciate this. You certainly clarified a lot of things for me and concerns I have for others, so thank you very much. If anyone has questions, please feel free to add them to the chat right now. I've been asking some of them that have come forward, but Donna, I really appreciate it because you're right. What you did for us here at the starting point on Vince's lecture is define for us our relationship with food and understanding some of the eating disorders that can come about.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for being here, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.